Hi, it's Oral Stories. If you enjoy tales that twist your brain and chill your bones, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe. Now, let me tell you about the tunnel under my apartment that shouldn't exist. I moved into the apartment 3 weeks ago. It's one of those too good to be true finds on a rental site, half the market price, in a city where even rats are paying premium. One bedroom, quiet neighborhood, industrial brick vibe that makes it look trendy in Instagram photos. The kind of place you feel lucky to find, until you realize why it was still available. It's not big, but it's enough. There's a living room, a bedroom just big enough to fit a double bed, and a tiny kitchen with cabinets that creak like bones when you open them. But hey, no roommates, no sketchy landlords breathing down my neck. The building is old, like creaky pipes, lead paint, century old, but the rent was real. And after the chaos of the last year, all I wanted was peace. Then there's the basement. Each unit has its own storage locker down there, a wire cage space secured with a padlock. Mine is tucked in the far back corner, next to the boiler room door no one seems to use. On move-in day, I went down with a box of books I didn't have shelf space for. The hallway lights flickered once, like something from a horror movie cliché, but I laughed it off. I wish I hadn't. Inside the storage unit, everything looked fine at first. Dusty. Cobwebs. The scent of mildew so thick it made me gag a little. But as I stepped deeper in, my foot tapped something solid, a flat, round, rust-colored circle embedded in the concrete. A hatch, roughly 3 feet wide, with 2 metal hinges and a large iron handle, bolted shut. I knelt to examine it. The bolts were old, corroded. Someone had once painted over them to blend it with the floor, but time and neglect had flaked most of it away. I tugged gently on the handle out of pure curiosity, and it didn't budge. What the hell are you hiding? I muttered to myself. There was no mention of this in the lease. I even checked the PDF again later that night, scrolling through the scanned building blueprint the agent had emailed me. No basement hatch. No access to a sub-basement. Just a simple layout, storage units, furnace room, stairwell. Still, something about it stuck in my head. It wasn't just that it was there. It was the way it felt deliberately hidden, like a door someone tried to erase. And something else, too, when I put my hand on it, the metal felt warm. Not just old pipe warm. Like body heat. Like something alive. I told myself I was being ridiculous. New place nerves. Basement mold hallucinations. I moved the box of books into the far corner and locked the cage behind me. That night, I couldn't sleep. It wasn't the usual creaks of a settling building. It wasn't traffic noise or mice in the walls. It was a sound, subtle but distinct, like the distant hum of machinery. Not modern HVAC thrum. More like an engine from an era that shouldn't be running anymore. It seemed to come from beneath me. The next morning, I tried to ignore it. I made coffee, checked emails, replied to a few work messages. The usual distractions. I told myself I'd go back down later and check if the sound was just old plumbing. Around noon, there was a knock at my door. A light tap-tap, as though whoever stood there wasn't sure I'd answer. I opened it to find a woman in her 60s, leaning on a cane, with perfectly curled white hair and large, watery eyes that somehow looked both kind and knowing. "Hi, dear. I'm Mrs. Elkins. I live right above you." I smiled politely. "Nice to meet you." "Oh, I know who you are," she interrupted, still smiling. "New blood always stands out in this building. Just wanted to say welcome, and a little advice." "Sure." She leaned in, her expression sharpening just a hair. "Don't go poking around the basement after dark." The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. "What do you mean?" Mrs. Elkins shrugged. "Some doors stay closed for a reason." Then, with a wink and a chuckle, she added, "Don't worry. You'll be fine as long as you sleep with your feet under the blanket." She turned and shuffled off before I could say anything else. That night, I didn't sleep at all. The day after Mrs. Elkins' cryptic warning, I did my best to slide back into normalcy. I had work, boring, repetitive, comfortingly dull work. I'm a freelance designer, which means lots of time spent alone, adjusting kerning on logos and pretending I understand color theory better than the client. It usually helps me relax. Not anymore. That hum from the basement, it hadn't gone away. If anything, it had settled in, a presence beneath the floorboards. Not constant, not loud, but always there, like a subtle vibration you only notice when the world goes quiet. I could feel it in my bones more than I could hear it. The next few days passed in a blur of passive paranoia. I didn't return to the basement. I didn't want to, but I couldn't stop thinking about it either. The hatch, the warmth, the silence that followed the humming, like the building itself was holding its breath. And I started noticing other things. First, it was the light. My bedroom has a cheap, pull-chain ceiling fixture. I always leave it off when I go to bed, but twice now I've woken up with it on, its yellow glow washing over the room like a crime scene lamp. At first, I thought maybe I sleepwalked. Maybe I hit the chain in a half-conscious daze. But the second time, I'd unplugged it entirely just to be sure. It still turned on. Then came the mail. I got a letter in my mailbox, an actual envelope, yellowed at the edges, no postage stamp. It was addressed to someone named J. V. Hallberg, apartment 3B. I live in 1A. There's no 3B. I checked with the landlord. Nope, never had a Hallberg in this building, he said, not even pretending to care. Might be a prank. Kids like that kind of crap. Except there aren't any kids in the building. I ran into Mrs. Elkins again 3 days later. She was outside, feeding stale breadcrumbs to pigeons that weren't there. I asked her straight up about the basement. You said not to go down there after dark, I said. Why? Her smile returned, tight-lipped and serene. Because that's when it listens. During the day, it sleeps. It doesn't notice you then. What is it? I asked. She turned away and tossed another handful of crumbs into the empty air. You don't want to meet it. She didn't answer any more questions. I tried to brush it all off as harmless weirdness. Some people are just eccentric. Some buildings creak and click and hum. Some old mail gets misdelivered. But it wasn't just that. My hallway started to feel wrong. The light bulb above my door flickers when I walk under it, only me. My neighbor's dog across the hall used to bark at everyone who passed. Now it just stares at my door. Doesn't move. Doesn't blink. And at night, I've started locking my bedroom door. I don't know why. It's not like anyone could get in. The building has a buzzer. My unit's door has 2 deadbolts. But some primal part of my brain insists on that extra layer, like I'm trying to keep something out or something in. Last night, I had a dream. I was in the basement again, but it was deeper. The walls weren't concrete. They were wet, breathing, pulsing like veins. The hatch wasn't on the floor this time. It was floating above me, spinning, humming with that same vibration. And when I looked up at it, I heard my own voice whisper, "Let me out." I woke up at 3:17 a.m. to find the bedroom door slightly open. I know I locked it. And on the floor, just inside the room, was a single feather, long, dark gray, slightly curved at the end, lying perfectly still. I don't own any pillows with feathers. I don't have birds. And somehow, I got the distinct sense the feather wasn't for me. The feather stayed on my desk for 2 days. I couldn't bring myself to throw it out. It didn't feel like trash. It felt like a warning or a token, something left behind on purpose. I started sleeping with the hallway light on after that. Bedroom door locked, chair shoved under the knob, flashlight within reach. I couldn't say what I was afraid of exactly, but it was growing. Like pressure before a storm. The hatch was still down there. I hadn't touched it since that first day, but I hadn't forgotten it either. In fact, it was becoming harder to ignore. Like it was quietly calling out, pulling my attention like gravity. No sound, just presence. So I decided to learn more. If I was going to live above something unnatural, I needed to know what it was. I started with the city's property records. At first, there was nothing unusual. The building was listed as 1219 Redford Avenue, built in 1928, originally part of a small housing initiative for factory workers. Ownership changed hands a few times. Then, oddly, there was a gap. From 1952 to 1963, there were no listed owners, no tenant records, no tax payments filed. It's like the building didn't legally exist for 11 years. Then it popped back up, sold to a private real estate group, renovated, and reopened in 1964. That group has owned it ever since. No complaints, no lawsuits. Clean on the surface. But one thing stuck out. A series of building permits filed in 1946 for structural reinforcement and experimental sub-foundation mapping. I didn't even know what that meant. So I went down to the local archives, the dusty basement of a library no one under 50 visits. I asked about Redford Avenue. The clerk handed me a manila folder that smelled like old glue and vinegar. Inside were a few black and white photos, a blueprint, and an internal memo marked restricted. The blueprint chilled me. It showed the building exactly as I knew it. 3 floors, 10 units, basement with storage. But scribbled in faded pencil was a second set of lines below the basement level. A tunnel, unlabeled. It connected to a larger, open chamber simply labeled. Access Room Z. No dimensions. No annotations. The memo next to it, dated 1949, was harder to read. Most of it redacted, but one paragraph was untouched. Repeated incidents of auditory hallucinations and time disorientation continue to be reported by subjects stationed near Access Room Z. Temporary closure recommended. Awaiting further instructions from Site Director Hallberg. That name again. Hallberg. The same name on that letter I received. I felt a chill bloom in the center of my chest. That night, I brought the blueprint home. I laid it out on my kitchen table, lining it up with my unit. If the drawing was accurate, the tunnel started directly under my storage locker, under the hatch I found on day one. The second access point was under the sidewalk outside. I folded the paper and poured myself a drink. At 2:14 a.m., I heard the basement door creak open downstairs. Not slam, not click, just creak. The long, slow kind that makes you freeze in place like prey. I stepped out of bed and tiptoed to my front door. Looked through the peephole. Nothing. But I could feel something had changed. The hum had returned, louder this time. More like a throb than a sound. I sat in the dark, back against the door, listening, waiting. Eventually, it stopped. The next morning, I found a new envelope outside my door. No name, no address, just a thin white slip of paper inside with one sentence, typed in a fixed-width font. He's still down there. I stared at the paper in my hand for a long time. He's still down there. No signature, no return address. Just that single sentence, typed like a bad ransom note. I didn't sleep after that. I just sat by the window, watching the sky lighten, wondering who he was and why someone wanted me to know he hadn't left. By sunrise, my resolve was cracked open. I needed answers. So I did something stupid. I went to find Mrs. Elkins. She didn't answer when I knocked. Her door, Unit 2B, was closed, but I could hear faint music playing inside. Old jazz, warbly and slowed down like it was coming through thick fog. I knocked again. Still nothing. I leaned closer, pressing my ear to the door. Someone was whispering inside, but not to me. I stepped back and left. I know what you're thinking. Why not break in? Why not force a conversation? But something about that door, something behind it, told me if I opened it, I wouldn't be able to unsee what was inside. Instead, I went back down into the basement. The air hit me the moment I opened the stairwell door. Musty, metallic, tinged with something like ozone. The lights buzzed above me. One of them had burned out completely, leaving a stretch of shadow across the far corner where my storage unit sat. I could see the outline of the hatch before I even reached it. Only now, it was open. Not fully. Just enough. Tilted maybe an inch upward on one side, like someone or something had pulled at it. Or pushed. I didn't move. I stood there, listening. But the hum was gone. Instead, I heard a knock. 3 slow, deliberate taps. Knock, knock, knock. It didn't come from the door behind me. It came from the hatch. I took a step forward, then another. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I reached the cage, unlocked it, and stepped inside. The hatch hadn't moved. Still slightly ajar. Still surrounded by cracked concrete and rust flakes. And sitting next to it was a tape recorder. Old school. Black plastic. Heavy buttons. It wasn't there before. A fresh cassette was already inside. I pressed play. There was nothing but static at first. Then, a voice, low, hoarse, male crackled through. If you're hearing this, it's too late to leave. He knows your name now. The tape clicked off. I just stood there, staring at the recorder. I didn't even realize my hand was shaking until I dropped it. It clattered against the concrete and split open. The tape popped out. On the reel was a name written in pen. Hallberg. When I turned around, I nearly screamed. Mrs. Elkins was standing just outside the wire gate. Don't open it, she said softly. Her voice wasn't scolding. It wasn't even fearful. It was resigned, like she'd watched this play out before. Many times. I didn't open it, I whispered. It was already doesn't matter. She shook her head. That thing. It gets into your head long before it gets into your world. I wanted to ask her more, what it was, what it wanted, but she'd already started walking away. I stood there alone, next to the hatch, next to the tape deck. And this time, when the knock came again, it answered in 4 taps. Knock, 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 knock. I didn't go back upstairs for a long time. I sat on the cold concrete floor of my storage unit, staring at the shattered tape recorder, the spool labeled Hallberg in fading blue ink. The recorder itself was cheap plastic, probably from the late 80s, but the tape looked older, far older. I told myself I'd imagine the 4 knocks, that maybe something fell behind the wall, pipes shifting, buildings settling, any excuse. But it wasn't true. I heard it, deliberate, rhythmic, a response. I took the tape upstairs, snapped it into my old cassette player. Yes, I still had one, and hit rewind. What I heard next was not the same voice from before. July 2nd, 1949. Dr. Hallberg, 3rd cycle, subject 14. Response time has decreased. The entity appears to recognize language now. It mimics, waits, learns. This morning, it said my name before I even opened the chamber. Long pause. I think it's listening through me, or with me. I don't sleep anymore. Louder, shakier voice. If you find this, it's already chosen you. Then, silence. Not static. Silence. I fast-forwarded. Nothing. Rewound. Played again. Just that same grim monologue from decades ago, left behind like a breadcrumb in a house long abandoned. But that last line. It's already chosen you. I could feel it, like a cold breath against the back of my neck. The rest of the day passed in fragments. I don't remember cooking. I don't remember eating. The next thing I recall is looking at the clock on my wall, 7:12 p.m., then blinking. Then it was 3:46 a.m. The lights were off. My phone was dead. The tape was still in the deck, unmoved. I felt dizzy, like I'd stood up too fast, but I hadn't moved at all. And there, on my kitchen table, next to the folded blueprint of the building, was a fresh sheet of paper. Typed. No envelope this time. Just one sentence. He's closer now. The memory issues got worse the next day. I couldn't remember whether I'd sent an email I clearly saw in my drafts, half-typed, dated 3 days ahead. I found my fridge door open with food missing, wrappers in the trash I don't remember eating. Then I checked the hallway security camera footage, the little motion sensor feed every unit has access to through a shared app. I watched myself go downstairs at 1:22 a.m. the night before. I watched myself come back up at 2:02 a.m. Except, I never went downstairs. I sat in my apartment the whole time, awake, scared, watching that same hallway on the live feed. Unless the version I watched wasn't me. The next time I saw Mrs. Elkins, she was sitting in the lobby chair that no one ever uses, her back straight, hands folded in her lap like she was expecting someone. I didn't say anything at first. She broke the silence. You went too close, she said. I listened to the tape. She nodded slowly. Then it knows your voice now, too. I asked her the question I'd been afraid to ask since the day I moved in. What is it? She didn't look at me when she answered. A listener. A mirror. A door. It shows you what you left behind. Then it takes what you forgot. That didn't make sense. None of it did. But something about it clicked into place behind my ribs. The hatch didn't lead to another room. It led to a reflected one. Something that listens, echoes, copies. And when it learns enough about you, it stops pretending. That night, I dreamed of myself. But I wasn't looking through my own eyes. I was watching, me, from below, looking up at myself through the hatch. And I smiled. The next morning, I did something I never thought I'd do. I brought a crowbar to the basement. I had spent hours staring at that blueprint again, over and over, tracing the lines with my finger like they were sacred. The original hatch under my storage unit wasn't the only way in. There was a second tunnel, less direct, starting beneath the sidewalk out front and bending in toward the same chamber, access room C. I had walked that sidewalk 100 times. It looked like any other stretch of cracked concrete. But now, every time I stepped over that part of the curb, I felt something shift beneath me, like the ground was hollow or watching. I didn't plan to open the hatch. Not yet. I needed to see the second entrance. Needed to know what else was buried in the bones of this place. The public access point was impossible to reach unnoticed, so I found an old maintenance hallway behind the boiler room, a narrow passage with rotting drywall and ancient pipes running like arteries overhead. It reeked of rust and standing water. And at the very end, past the clutter of broken fans and moth-eaten insulation, was a metal door I'd never noticed before. No knob, just a latch and rusted hinges. I wedged the crowbar into the seam and heaved. It groaned open like a dying animal. Behind it was a stone tunnel, dry but covered in moss and tangled cables. Most were long dead, but a few blinked faintly like they were still drawing power from some buried grid. I stepped inside, flashlight in one hand, crowbar in the other. The air changed instantly. Colder, denser. It wasn't just temperature, it was like pressure. My ears popped. The tunnel sloped slightly downward, and I had to duck to avoid low-hanging beams wrapped in wire and cloth strips. Then I saw the first mark. A symbol scrawled onto the stone wall in black grease pencil. 3 circles overlapping like a crude Venn diagram, surrounded by jagged lines. Below it was a name. Hallberg. And below that, in shaky handwriting. It followed me. I pressed forward. The corridor twisted slightly, and after maybe 30 feet, the tunnel opened into a collapsed room. Like the shell of a command center, consoles broken and overturned, rotary phones smashed on the ground, walls scorched by heat or time. Something horrible had happened here. But what caught my eye was the scrapbook, lying perfectly centered on a metal table still bolted to the floor. I opened it. Each page was covered in Polaroids, blurry photos of people standing at the hatch. Different clothes, different eras, but always the same basement. Always the same look on their faces, blank, hollow, like something had already emptied them out. One photo was labeled in neat cursive. Subject number 21. Repetition begins. Then another. Subject number 28. Language acquired. And finally, one I recognized. Subject number 31. Daniel C. Current. That's my name. I dropped the book. How long had it been down here? Who took these pictures? And how the hell did it know my name before I found the tunnel? Then I heard it. The sound of a cassette rewinding. Somewhere deeper in the dark. I raised the flashlight, but it flickered wildly, then died completely. And then, light returned, but not from me. It came from a figure holding a tape recorder, standing at the far end of the corridor. Not moving, not speaking, just holding the recorder up like a beacon. I stepped back, and in perfect sync, it stepped forward. I ran. I didn't even look back. I bolted up the slope, heart in my throat, scraping my shoulder against exposed brick, breath ragged. The hallway stretched longer than I remembered. I should have reached the door in seconds. Instead, it took minutes. When I finally burst back into the boiler room, I checked my phone. The time was 7:03 p.m., but I'd left my apartment at 11:40 a.m. That night, I didn't dream, but I woke up with dirt on my hands, and under my nails were tiny flakes of black grease pencil. The next morning, I heard my voice before I spoke. It came from the bathroom mirror. I was brushing my teeth, half awake, when I mumbled something like, "I look like hell." But in the split second before the words left my lips, I heard them first from the other side of the glass. Same tone, same cadence, just a half second too early. I dropped the toothbrush, heart pounding, staring at my own reflection. Nothing moved. Nothing changed. But I swear to God, for that fraction of a moment, my mouth hadn't opened yet, and the mirror was already speaking. I didn't leave the apartment for the rest of the day. I turned on every light, put masking tape over the mirror, even unplugged the microwave, as if the hatch's voice could ride through the wiring. Paranoia makes you superstitious. And the worst part? The tape recorder was back. I found it on my kitchen table, fully intact, clean, untouched, like I hadn't smashed it 2 days ago. Inside was a new tape, labeled simply, "Play me, Daniel." I didn't want to. Every cell in my body told me not to, but I did. Recording starts, static crackles. "Hi, it's me." "Well, it's you." Long pause. "You already opened it. You just don't remember." That's how it works. They say memory is what makes us human. That's why it takes that first. The voice laughs, my laugh dry and broken. "Don't worry. You'll forget this too." I hit stop, then rewind. But when I played it again, it wasn't the same. Stop listening. Stop listening. Stop. I yanked the tape out and hurled it across the room. It bounced off the wall and fell flat, still humming faintly like a dying insect. That's when I noticed my laptop webcam light was on. Recording. I hadn't opened any apps. I hadn't touched it all day. I checked the file it was saving. It was a video, nearly 3 hours long. Footage of me, asleep on the couch. Except I never sleep on the couch. I sleep in the bedroom, door locked. And in the video, I wasn't alone. Something stood behind me the whole time, never moving, never speaking, just watching. A tall silhouette, blurred like static, always just outside the edge of focus. Like my brain refused to resolve its shape. And then, around the 2 hours, 16 minutes, and 4 seconds mark, I sat up in the video, not like someone waking up, like something that had been playing dead. I turned slowly toward the camera, and I smiled. Wide. Too wide. My mouth kept opening, far past what felt natural. And then the video glitched out, pixels smeared across the screen like melting film. When it resumed, the room was empty. I shut the laptop. I don't know what I'm more afraid of, that the video is real, or that I recorded it myself. I checked the hallway camera feed again. There was a brief entry at 2:20 a.m. Motion detected. Footage unavailable. Just an error message. File missing. Subject logged internally. Later that night, I heard my voice again, this time from the basement vent. I sat in the living room, motionless, as it whispered up through the grating. "Daniel, it's safe now. I'm you. You're me. Let me out." The voice was gentle, familiar, reassuring. And that terrified me more than anything else. Because it almost worked. For just a moment, I actually believed it. I didn't wait until morning. After hearing my voice crawl up through the vent like a lie in my own throat, I grabbed my jacket, pocketed a flashlight, and went straight to Unit 2B. Mrs. Elkins had answers. Enough of this cryptic advice and pitying glances. I wanted the truth. No more riddles, no more nods to a past I didn't understand. This time, she answered the door. Not slowly, not cautiously. She was already standing there, like she'd been waiting. "Come in," she said. Her apartment looked like a time capsule, lace curtains, dusty shelves, porcelain figurines staring blankly from every corner. A record spun softly in the corner, playing some tune I couldn't place, all brass and sorrow. I didn't sit down. "I want answers," I told her. "No more riddles. No more warnings. You knew this was coming. You knew it would find me." She stared out the window. "It finds everyone, eventually. But I thought maybe you'd be different. You keep calling it. What is it?" She took a long breath, then said, "He was my brother." I froze. "Who?" "Dr. Julian Hallberg. The one from the tape." She turned to face me now, her eyes sharp with memory. He wasn't always a monster. He was just curious, brilliant, obsessive. He worked in research during the late 40s, private sector stuff, contracted by some off-books group that never gave a real name. They were obsessed with sound, with resonance. They said certain frequencies could open doors. Doors to what? I asked. She smiled faintly. That's what he asked. Every day. Until one opened. She led me to a dusty cabinet and pulled out a thick leather journal. Inside were sketches, formulas, sound maps, notes scribbled in a tight, frantic hand. He found something, she whispered. A pattern. A vibration buried under the earth. Not mechanical. Not natural. Something that responded. I flipped through the pages. Half the ink was smudged. Some entries had been scratched out completely. I told him to stop, she continued. I begged him. But he said it was talking to him. That it had a name, but couldn't say it. That it lived in mirrors, in tunnels, in memory. It wasn't a creature. It was a place. I felt sick. You helped him build the hatch. She nodded. I helped seal it. She sat down, finally looking tired. I changed my name when the project was buried. I thought if I lived above it, I could watch the door, warn people, intervene if it ever reached out again. But the entity doesn't need the hatch to infect someone. Just attention, curiosity. Once you've seen it, heard even a fragment of its signal, it's inside you. I stared at her. So what do I do now? She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You don't. That's the thing. You're already inside it. I left her apartment without saying anything else. I don't remember unlocking my door or walking back in. All I know is, when I got home, the lights were already on, and I was already there, sitting on my couch, head tilted slightly, eyes empty, watching me like a mirror that blinked out of sync. I didn't scream. I didn't speak. I just stared at the version of myself sitting on the couch. He didn't move, didn't blink. His posture was stiff, artificial, like someone trying to imitate how a person should sit, like a memory corrupted just enough to be almost believable. And yet, he looked tired, the way I've looked in every mirror lately.